The linchpin of autoimmune diseases is the T regulatory cell, or Treg. In autoimmune diseases, there is a deficiency of T regulatory cells or a dysfunction of T regulatory cells. So that if we are able to correct the deficiency or the dysfunction of these cells, we should be able to cure lupus. But how can we achieve this? Lupus is a systemic autoimmune disease in which the tissues of the body are attacked and damaged by our own immune systems. This can cause serious disability and affects the lives profoundly of millions of people around the world. Two main cells are involved in the tissue destruction that we see in SLE lupus: T cells and B cells, and they work together to cause the damage to the tissues that we see. Immune system cells attack specific antigens on invading bacteria or viruses or in the tissues of the body. Normally, the immune system will only attack proteins that are considered not our own, not a part of our tissues. In autoimmune diseases, however, the immune system attacks our own tissues. As stated earlier, one of the underlying causes of autoimmune diseases is a dysfunction or a deficiency of T regulatory cells. Regulatory T cells suppress the immune system and thereby prevent the immune system from attacking our own tissues. Regulatory T cells suppress the immune system by myriad mechanisms, including secreting chemicals known as cytokines that can suppress T cells that damage the tissues in autoimmune diseases. This is like dousing a fire with water to extinguish it. T regulatory cells can also prevent antigen-presenting cells known as dendritic cells, whose function is to show the immune system which proteins and cells to attack, from functioning properly. And thereby, the T regulatory cells can curb the immune response and prevent autoimmunity. The dendritic cells are like a giant signboard pointing the immune system at those cells and proteins that it needs to attack to protect us. T regulatory cells can also directly suppress B cells and T cells and osteoclasts. By suppressing the B cells, they can prevent the formation of autoantibodies, and they can also directly lyse or destroy inflammatory cells. But where do these regulatory T cells come from? They are usually formed in the thymus, a gland that is found directly behind the breastbone. But they can also be induced in the blood circulation in the periphery. T regulatory cells can be identified by the presence of CD4, CD25, and transcription factor FOXP3. The importance of T regulatory cells in controlling autoimmunity is seen in animal experiments in which mice with autoimmune deficiency were given normal T cells, and shortly thereafter they developed autoimmune diseases. However, if T regulatory cells were infused at the same time that the normal T cells were given to these animals, they did not develop autoimmunity. Scientists at a university in Australia were able to solve this T regulatory cell deficiency in lupus using a unique technique. They harvested T regulatory cells from patients with lupus, and using lentiviruses, they inserted DNA encoding for T cell receptors directed against specific antigens in the body into these T regulatory cells. T cell receptors are proteins on the surface of T cells that activate T cells when they bind antigens. They're like an alarm in a firehouse. Once the lever is pulled, all hell breaks loose. The genetic material inserted into the T regulatory cells causes the T cell receptors directed against these specific antigens to appear on the surface of the T regulatory cells. These newly reconstituted T regulatory cells are then reinfused into the patient. These new T cell receptors on the surface of the T regulatory cells cause them to bind directly to the antigen to which they are directed. They act similar to homing pigeons, which fly directly to their homes once they are released. In this way, these new T regulatory cells move directly to the antigen to which they are targeted. Directly targeting T regulatory cells to a specific antigen make them more effective than untargeted T regulatory cells. They're then able to suppress the immune system cells that are attacking tissues with this specific antigen and causing the symptoms that we see in patients with lupus. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.